Good morning. Let's settle in, try to move from a place of doing to a place of being for at least the next hour. And I'll start things off with a poem by Danielle Coffin called I Want to Be Unproductive. I want to ponder the meaning of yellow, to listen as summer cicadas sing their final symphony of the season, to dine with friends, to savor course after course, to inhale the scent of San Marzano tomatoes bathed in balsamic brine, to taste vanilla bean gelato and espresso on my tongue, to study the morning habits of a neighborhood robin, to plunge blistered toes into sun-ripened sand, to float in the sea, to feel my heartbeat slow to the rhythm of the tide, to memorize the laugh lines of a California redwood, to spend a morning rereading stories from childhood, to determine which song most resembles a honeybee collecting lavender pollen, to observe a spider spinning her web, to chart freckled constellations along my child's spine, to taste every croissant in the city, to rest for the sole purpose of slowing down, to savor stillness, to allow myself the gift of being. Good morning again. I'm Richard Schramm, the service coordinator, your guide to today's service. Welcome to this caring, sharing community on this cold but clear Sunday, October 15th. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Welcome to the North Chapel, where we aspire to be a congregation that nurtures the growth and supports the needs of its members, sustains a strong spiritual life within a loving church community, and seeks to have a positive impact on the world around us. A special welcome to those who are visiting, and we do have our visiting speakers today. I'll mention them in a minute and talk about them. Anybody else who's visiting would like to stand up and say hello and where you're from? I don't see any new faces here.
I'm sort of visiting. Brent.
Oh, yeah, of course. But Brent, you're not a new face here. No, we know who you are. That's
not right next door.
Yeah, nice to see you. I'm glad you're here. So please turn off your cell phones. And Tatum is here to be with the children, or the child. And I have a few announcements. First of all, Matt and Gail misplaced their keys last night, given all the excitement of our bingo game. And this is not a joke, Matt. I know it's serious. So if you were here last night and you happen to see a set of keys, they belong to Gail. And we could all take a look downstairs to help them out with that. The wreath sale, this is the last day for the wreath sale. Find, as in most things, find Mary, and she'll help you out with that. Barbara Abraham would like to, after the service, for those who are interested in learning the sign language to the Spirit of Life, something that she's done for the past many times and is very good at, but is now clearly retired. She says she's retired from that, but she would like to teach that to any folks who would like to join her after the service. And Mary has an announcement.
Good morning. As many of you have guessed from the insert in your order of service, today is the start of our Stewardship Pledge Drive. We've added these financial inserts to your order of service for the past 3 weeks, as the board and the finance committee feel strongly that we should be transparent about our church's finances. If you haven't seen the inserts, please look on our website under church notices. We are starting the pledge drive a couple of weeks earlier, thanks to David Cook's advice from his church, so that we can end on November 19th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Some of you will receive a letter by mail, or have already received it, and others an email containing the letter, the pledge form, a giving guide, and a sheet of frequently asked questions. And on the table in back of the sanctuary, we also have, I think, the whole packet, the letter, all of the things that I described, plus pledge forms. So last month, Vermont Public held their annual fall fund drive, and being a die-hard listener to Vermont Public, I kept the radio on instead of turning it off until they were through. I was already thinking about the stewardship drive, and I was struck by the similarities of our two organizations. Both the North Chapel and Vermont Public are member-supported organizations. We do not have to be a member to listen to Vermont Public or be a member to come to the North Chapel. Like them, we come to you for a limited period and ask for your support. Fortunately, we only do it once a year as opposed to the 4 times Vermont Public does it. Unfortunately, like them, we do not have a generous donor or donors who are willing to match our pledge. How nice that would be. In making a pledge to both organizations, you can pay a lump sum or pay monthly, as Vermont Public sustaining members do. Your pledge to the North Chapel or your sustaining gift to Vermont Public allows both of these organizations to be able to plan financially for the future. Each of us sets a financial goal for our drive and announces our progress as the pledges come in. This year, the Finance Committee has suggested a goal of $160,000. This may feel like a very big stretch, but if everyone gives as they are able, together we can reach this goal. The value of every gift matters, no matter the size. On the radio Friday morning, Jen Jarecki, the host of Morning Edition, signed off saying, "Thanks to our sustaining members who keep this boat afloat." This is true for us too. You are the people who keep our North Chapel boat afloat. Thank you so much for your support.
One other announcement is that after the service and after you've learned that sign language, coffee hour will be held downstairs in the social hall with some goodies, I understand. See the order of service and the website for other announcements. Leon is away. Our speakers today are Pat Autilio. I'm sorry, I didn't get that last I in there. Pat Autilio and Sue Buckholz. Pat is a retired engineer and manager who's lived in the Upper Valley since 2018. He spends his time working on social justice causes and pursuing his passion for making music. He has led the Upper Valley Humanists since 2019. Sue is a member of both the Upper Valley Humanists and the First Universalist Society of Hartland. A practicing attorney with an office in Quechee, Sue's best days there are spent mediating disputes to a fair and reasonable conclusion. Pat and Sue will lead a brief conversation on the similarities and differences between the theory and practice of Unitarianism and humanism today. And I have to say, I'm really curious and interested to find out more about humanism, since I know it's kind of linked in with the Unitarian history and so forth. So thank you both for being here. When I was putting these opening words together, I thought a lot about this month's theme of curiosity. And I thought about its links to wonder and imagination, but I found it hard to come up with ideas or readings that were all that interesting. And then I learned that Louise Glück, a most interesting person, winner of many prizes, including the Nobel Prize in Literature, a poet with deep roots in Vermont, someone who spoke in the sanctuary only a few years ago, had died, and I found myself curious about her life and her poetry. If I have nothing to say about curiosity, I thought I could at least put it into practice. Here's a glimpse of her life and work. I drew a lot from her obituary in the online newspaper, Vermont Digger. There's a question about how you say G-L-U-C-K with a U with 2 dots over it, but I've been told it's Glick. Now, I may have it wrong, but in any case, just stick with me on that. You know who I mean. Louise Glick came to Vermont on a visit to Goddard College, which I had the pleasure of teaching at for a number of years, which is in Plainfield. She joined the faculty and stayed for many years. Later, looking back, she wrote, "My writing life at that point was spent sitting in front of a piece of white paper at a typewriter, completely paralyzed. The minute I got to Vermont, I thought, this is where I'm supposed to be. It was one of the most dramatic, transformative experiences of my life. I started writing with a fluency that I had never experienced." So Vermont was a very special place for her. She faced many personal struggles and addressed them in her writing. This is really interesting. "I write to discover meaning. Nothing should be wasted. Something must come of it. And writing is kind of a revenge against circumstance, bad luck, loss, pain. If you make something out of it, then you've no longer been bested by these events." I might add, if you're not a writer, I believe conversation and sharing can also give meaning to difficult events and struggles and somehow reduce their power over you. I remember years ago, the late good friend, Joris Kogars, asked me why I talked about death and dying. Why not just live my life fully and then just die? I told him that made a lot of sense, but at least for me, talking about these topics seemed to reduce my fear of them. It gave them less power over me. Anyhow, here are parts of poems where Glick seems to be discovering meaning and taking revenge against difficult circumstances. Amazing Grayers, take note. Glick was a profound and witty poet about growing old. In the poem Averno, she writes about the speaker's children. "I know what they're saying when I'm out of the womb. Should I be seeing someone? Should I be taking one of the new drugs for depression? I can hear them in whispers planning how to divide the cost. And I want to scream out, you're all of you living in a dream. Bad enough, they think, to watch me falling apart. Bad enough without this lecturing they get these days, as though I had any right to this new information. Well, they have the same right. They're living in a dream, and I'm preparing to be a ghost." In another example, she essentially writes about food, but is really writing about much more. This is a poem, or part of a poem called Baskets. "I take my basket to the brazen market, to the gathering place. I ask you, how much beauty can a person bear? It's heavier than ugliness. Even the burden of emptiness is nothing beside it. Crates of eggs, papayas, sacks of yellow lemons. I'm not a strong woman. It isn't easy to want so much, to walk with such a heavy basket, either bent reed or willow." And finally, from a poem, Snowdrops, in which she describes rebirth after winter. It's a little bit early for this one, but it will happen. "I did not expect to survive, earth suppressing me. I didn't expect to waken again, to feel in damp earth my body, able to respond again, remembering after so long how to open again in the cold light of earliest spring. Afraid, yes, but among you again, crying yes, risk, joy, in the raw wind of the new world. Preparing to be a ghost. The burden of wanting so much. Having the earth suppress me. So much to ponder in the poetry of this prolific writer. We will now have a time of silent meditation. I invite Pat and Sue up to give the reflection.
Good morning.
Hello.
So Richard had sent something out on Friday asking if we had a reading, and I saw it only this morning. But I went into my computer, and in 3 different places I found this poem, so I think it must be the right one. You let me know. It's A Ritual to Read to Each Other by William Stafford. He's a former poet laureate and a lifelong pacifist who had a lot of good things to say. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade holding each other's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep.
Thanks for that.
Sure.
So, Sue, you want to give a little background of who you are in case somebody in this room doesn't know?
Oh,
How did you arrive at humanism?
I arrived at humanism.
It's kind of a hard question.
You know, I started as a Catholic schoolgirl, loving everything about Catholicism until Vatican II. And they took away the incense and they took away the Latin. I was like, is that it? I remember, in second grade thinking, what? This is it? So I kind of just played along for a while. And so, because my mother, I like to call my mother one of the only true Christians I've known in my life. She had the essence and she lived it, but it was not right for me. So I wandered around for a while and I came to UUism. That's a whole nother story involving my son and seeing a crucifix up on a hill and saying, hey Mom, look at that T, because his name was TJ. And I thought, well, we better do something to get this kid used to his culture he's gonna live in. When I found humanism, it made the most sense to me, so.
Great. So, yeah, I'll tell my story. So I come from a very mixed heritage. I started out being baptized Catholic, and that was my only exposure to Catholicism really growing up directly. My mother, a single mom, and we celebrated Christian and Jewish holidays because her father was Jewish and her mother was a Methodist. And so we celebrated Christmas and Easter, and I went to a Presbyterian Sunday school, which I didn't find a lot of interest in. And we did the Passover Seders in Hebrew every year. And my grandfather read the Seders in Hebrew. And then, so I got exposure to just about everything. And by the time I was a young adult, I had no belief in any of that because it was, it was kind of, I was a little whipsawed by it, I guess you say. And so, yeah, I was very, kind of staunch in my unbelief for a long time and a snarky atheist. Until it occurred to me that, atheism, all that says is what you're not, right? And, I'm also a non-Chinese speaker, and I'm also a non-golfer, and the list goes on and on. So being an atheist doesn't really mean much when it comes right down to it. When I came up to the Upper Valley, there was a humanist group here, which Sue was a member, and the values lined up pretty well for me. And so I said, okay, this is something I can sign up for, and yeah. So should we talk a little bit about what humanism is? Now that we've been saying the word.
Yeah.
Sure. So, and also the origins of humanism are out of Unitarianism. So it was Unitarians that, and humanism per se, you could go back to ancient Greece, and you can go back to the Renaissance. But American Humanist Association and that organization started in, was it 1927, something like that, from a group of Unitarians who were trying to define something that was, had all the values of Unitarianism without the religious aspect. So, and the original members of that humanist organization, they wrote the Humanist Manifesto, and Albert Einstein was one of the members, and others. So, yeah. So, the fundamental difference between, I would say, between humanism and UUism is belief in God.
Yeah. And while you're talking, I remembered I came to humanism through agnosticism, which appealed to me a lot. And it actually helped me find my husband, who I've had now for 24 years, and I think I'll keep him, because I had a bumper sticker on the back of my truck that said, "Militant agnostic, I don't know and you don't either." And when he first came to my house, he said, "I've been driving behind you for years in the Upper Valley, and I've been wondering who has this on the back of their truck." So, and that is really, I think, my core belief is we don't know. So why am I going to criticize somebody else for their belief system? And why am I going to denigrate it? I may not understand it, and there's certainly people who I think take it to the point of weaponizing their religious beliefs, but that's another story for another day.
Right. So to be clear, humanists, which sometimes you hear secular humanists, and that's true. There's no belief in any sort of supernatural entity or spiritual entity. There's no belief in an afterlife or reincarnation, any sort of thing. There's no belief in heaven or hell. So it's fundamentally about your knowledge of this world, and your behavior is guided by what you see around you, and your conclusions that you draw intellectually from that. So, and there's a lot that flows from that for humanists. So, there's some kind of founding documents for humanism. I mentioned the Humanist Manifesto, and the first manifesto was written in 1933. And now we're up to the manifesto number 3, and so that's a good sign. Humanists are willing to look at their stated principles and revise them as it makes sense, as the culture changes in there. We change and we learn. So. I invite you to look at the Humanist Manifesto. I'll just read, it's a short 2 pages. I'll just read the first paragraph. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. Right?
It's hard to argue it.
It's hard to argue.
That's right.
So, I don't know, is something you want to say about humanism?
Well, research on the internet is always fascinating. It takes you to places you wouldn't have thought you'd go. So when I was looking for definitions for all these different things, the American Psychology Association popped up. And then I started thinking, well, like, are we in the DM, whichever one we're up to
DSM,
now?
right? DSM 5.
I don't know why they were bothering with their own definition. And their synonyms on their website for humanists is skeptic, doubter, questioner, doubting Thomas, challenger, scoffer, cynic, disbeliever, non-believer, rationalist, and nullifidian. I didn't have time to look that up, but I love it as a word.
I'll make a note of it.
Yes, we'll have to talk about it at the next meeting. But it's also negative, and I've never found this to be a negative philosophy or outline for my spiritual or non-spiritual life.
So maybe I can give some more on the positive side, what we believe in, right? So there's a book I'm holding in my hand. It makes me feel more comfortable, but it's a short read. It's called.
This is the lawyer's book. We all have 3-ring binders everywhere we go. So.
Creating Change Through Humanism. So this is kind of the main book you'll get if you sign up for the American Humanist Association, and you can get this. So one of the things they put together to kind of summarize what humanism's all about is it's called the 10 Commitments. Not 10 Commandments, no. 10 Commitments, so I'll just read the titles. And these are going to ring true because I looked at the UU 7 principles, right? It's right, it's same kind of thing. Altruism, caring for the world around us, critical thinking, empathy, ethical development, global awareness, humility, peace and social justice, responsibility, service, and participation. And again, it's kind of hard to argue with that. And I think we can all agree that humanism and UUism, I guess you'll say, they're like very similar, very, very, very similar. I told my wife Marcia, it's like chunky peanut butter versus creamy peanut butter. You usually love one and you hate the other, but they're the same thing. And that's in a nutshell, I think, what we can say briefly about humanism.
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing I will say, and this is just purely a plug, I don't know if you do anything on Sunday mornings. Oh, wait a minute. Anyway, we do have meetings in the Norwich Library Community Room. And humanism's generally, you'll find fewer of the trappings of a church in our meetings or ritual, but we get together and talk about ideas and issues of the day. So in November 5th, actually I'm leading the discussion on good without God. So it's a question that comes up all the time for humanists. How can you lead a moral life without being handed some set of ethical principles from a deity or some document, right? So we're going to talk about that. And on November 19th, we're going to have someone from the Vermont Humanities Council talk with us about how does free speech coexist with hate speech?
Can free speech endure hate speech?
Can free speech endure hate speech is the correct title of that. So anyway, I can provide the information on that.
It's nice when someone shows up and tries to take your membership away, isn't it?
So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, the only other thing I was thinking about through this is I belonged to UU churches since about, well, it was in the 80s, Connecticut and then up here. And I don't see this so much anymore, but for years, I saw pushback on people who were Christian, who came to UU services. And actually it was Republicans and Christians that we did not have great tolerance for. And it always bothered me. And I was president of, back when we had districts, I was president of the Northern New England District for a while, so I went to the national meetings, and it was kind of universal. We used to talk about it at those meetings a lot, like how do we put this, how do we remember that caustic remarks about people who have a belief system that we don't have, how do we get better at that? And I think we have. I haven't seen that for quite a while, or maybe people who identify as Christian don't seek us out anymore. I don't know, but it's just something I try to keep in mind in both of the groups that I'm in. Tolerance is, I think it's really at risk in our culture right now, and I try to remember to keep that in the front of my mind.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to close it out.
There you go.
Thank you, Sue.